Welcome back, band family. We learned a couple notes at our last lesson. We learned G. That's where you hold the barrel with your right hand, and you're going to bring it up into position and play a note. Let's try playing that G together. To check our sound, let's use the Bandmate app. First, set it to Clarinet. Next, set the switch on the right-hand side so that it is in the top position. I should have selected the flat symbol. That's the half of a heart with a line through it. I don't want to select the bottom symbol, which is a sharp. It looks like a hashtag. Have the top one selected. Let's try playing that G. G, right? That's the note that I produced. So that is the correct note. I also introduced to you one other note, and it's called E. To play E, I'm going to put my thumb on the back of the instrument, and my left first finger I'm going to hold down on that first ring. The other fingers would go on the second ring, and then the whole, we're not going to use those right now. We're just doing thumb 1. The numbering system is thumb and then 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to do just thumb 1. Let's try that now. That's E. That was an E. One of the things you'll notice about clarinet compared to recorder is that we have to use a lot of air. It produces a much bigger sound, but we have to have a lot of air behind it. If you're used to barely blowing at all, like with recorder, it's not going to sound right on clarinet. You got to put some air behind it. So I'm going to teach you two new notes today. The first note is the note immediately below E. It's going to be thumb 1, 2. To understand why this sounds the way it does, you have to realize that the instrument is only as long as where the first sound comes out of. I'll explain what I mean. If I have just this part of the instrument, it's a much higher pitched sound. It is an A flat that's really, really high, a very high A flat, because the instrument is only this long. It's very small. If I were to play a G, the instrument is much bigger. All the air comes out of the very first hole, which is right there. So this is now the length of the instrument. If I close this one and close this first finger here, the first open hole is going to be down there. And that's where the sound comes out of for E. If I then add another finger on, now all the sound is coming out of right there. And so the instrument keeps getting bigger the more fingers I add on. As the instrument gets bigger, it gets lower. To help you remember that, think about trumpets versus tubas. Which is bigger, a trumpet or a tuba? A tuba. So the bigger the instrument, the lower the sound. Same way here. G is higher, E is lower, and as I add on more fingers, it gets lower. That's why the how low can you go exercise works. As we keep adding more fingers on, the instrument basically becomes longer. So D is thumb 1, 2. And it's called D because it's one letter below E in the alphabet. It's one letter before E. So if we think of the alphabet A, B, C, D, E, one letter before E is D. And that note was D. I'm going to teach you one more note today. We already had thumb 1, 2. Let's add on that next finger down, and that's going to be our new note. Thumb 1, 2, 3. I've got a question for you. Since I've now made the instrument longer, is the sound going to be higher or lower than on D? It's going to be lower, right? Because the instrument has become bigger. It's going to be one letter below D in the alphabet. So what comes before D in the alphabet? Say the alphabet and figure it out. A, B, C, D. Oh, C. I said C before D, so this must be C. I had E and then D and then C. As the instrument gets bigger and lower, I go backwards through the alphabet. I have to warn you about this. Before we start playing this with the Tuner app, it's not going to say C. It's actually going to say either C sharp, if you had this symbol over here selected, or it'll say D flat if you don't. There's a reason for that. We'll talk about that in a sec. But first, let's go ahead and play C and just realize that Bandmate may tell you something different. Yeah, it tells you a different note. There's a reason for that. This starts to get a little complicated, but D flat, flat means down a half. So D flat is halfway down from D going down to C. So you might be wondering, well, if adding another finger on is supposed to take it all the way down to C, why does it say D flat on Bandmate? The reason for that is because we're only playing with half the instrument. D is here, C needs to be a little bit longer. The top part of the rest of the instrument is also part of that note. And so we're a little bit short of the full length of the instrument we need for C, which is just fine for now. So don't worry about using the rest of the instrument. Remember, Texas method. Don't go on to the next part until we've mastered this. So just realize for now that when you use Bandmate, it's going to say D flat instead of C. This note is actually C, and it will be once we have the rest of the instrument later on in about a week or two. So for now, E, D, and C. You now know the names of each of those notes. In addition to that note G, you know 4 different notes. Fantastic. Every day I want you to work on this. I want you to spend a lot of time making sure you can produce an A flat with mouthpiece and barrel. Use that Bandmate app. Then work on doing the how low can you go exercise, because this is a great way to really get our fingers in the right spot. Make sure that our right hand is right here and get a good sound the whole time. Chin up. Then work on G's, E's, D's, and C's. Each of those notes should be played separately. Don't try to mix them or go from one to the next. We'll get to that later. I mean, how low can you go is fine, but don't start messing around yet. Remember, Texas method. Try each of those notes a couple times each day and check them against Bandmate. Make sure it tells you the correct note. Except don't worry about C. C should appear as D flat, but otherwise everything else should look correct. So you have a lot to work on over the next week. Fantastic. Until next time. Go practice.